Hello, I'm Alex Popov, Head of Private Credit at Carlyle. I'm here today to talk about the investment opportunities we are seeing in sports, media, and entertainment verticals. By way of background, we at Carlyle have invested over the years in the sector. Within credit specifically, over the last 5 years, we invested over $3 billion. So why has sports, media, and entertainment emerged as a sector ripe for investment over those 5 years? And what dynamics do we see? First, we view SME, sports, media, and entertainment, as a very scaled market undergoing sustainable long-term changes. And these changes result in uncorrelated growth. They're driven by adoption of technology and globalization of content. When we dive deeper into the market, what we see is that the market is actually almost 3 distinct segments: the actual content ownership, the distribution of that content, and the services involved in creating and distributing that content. Probably the most logical place to start is by discussing visual content, specifically TV and film, and how the industry has changed over the last 15 years. If any of you can recall the days before Apple TV or iPhone, 15 years ago is when Apple introduced its first generation Apple TV that allowed movie fans access to, at the time, a limited library of titles. At the same time, Netflix launched its first video-on-demand service. Now fast forward to 2023. There are over 650 million streaming subscribers globally. 300 different streaming services. 85% of US households have at least one streaming service today. That compares to 67% that have access to cable TV. So streaming has completely changed the way we consume media. And this market continues to grow and is expected to grow by another 20% per year, at least through 2030, reaching over $300 billion. This proliferation of options has dramatically increased access to content globally and significantly increased convenience for consumers. Streaming means one can watch at their own time, pace, and location. And mobile access has further exacerbated that. In 2007, only 6% of people had access to smartphones. Today, it's more than 90%. As a result, the one thing that is needed, given the distribution today, is content. And content did not keep up with the growth that access and distribution had. Global annual TV and film content spend has roughly doubled over the last 10 years, and most of that growth came over the last 5 years, as key streamers such as Netflix and Disney doubled their expenditure. The above dynamics resulted in 2 key trends that we at Carlyle have proactively invested in over the last 5 years. First, value of existing core content will continue to appreciate. Streaming libraries need to be filled. 2, the creation of new content is driving demand for auxiliary services, such as talent procurement, logistics, and technology. We have invested across the board in this ecosystem: content, technology, logistics, procurement. Very recently, we invested in New Regency, a film studio. We provided the company with capital that they needed for further investment into new content. However, our capital was secured and collateralized in the value of the library of New Regency, in the existing library of film they have. This investment allowed the company to execute on its business plan and allowed our investors to earn attractive yields secured by the IP rights in the assets. The concepts I discussed about proliferation of distribution channels hold true in the world of music and have produced a momentum-shifting decade for the music industry. Streaming services, mobile access, and globalization of demand have all resulted in a high single-digit growth rates in revenues for the music industry, and it is expected that will continue at least through 2030. Consumption of music is now almost entirely driven by streaming services such as Spotify and Apple Music. These developments, in turn, have created a new asset class in music IP and royalties. To put some perspective and numbers around the opportunity set, recorded music and music publishing generated $32 billion of income in 2022. This would imply, at current market valuations for content, approximately a $500 billion market to invest in intellectual property, with growth characteristics and returns. We have already invested into the IP rights by artists such as Keith Urban, Katy Perry, and Benny Blanco. What about the world of sports? It seems that every day there is an announcement in the media about a new investment in a sports team or businesses around the world of sports. And that all makes sense. As streaming grew, the ability that consumers obtained is to watch content such as TV, film, or listen to music at their own pace. That in turn made it very challenging for mainstream TV to maintain relevance in consumers' day. But for live sports, that's the one outlier. Sport is ultimately content, and probably one of the only contents out there that has to be watched live. Try to stay away from knowing the results of the US Open in September. As a result, TV broadcasting and cable focus its resources on securing this content, and value of sports media contracts has significantly increased. That value has trickled down to teams, player contracts, and demand for auxiliary businesses and technology. For example, one way we invested capital in the world of sports is focusing on distribution. In a recent investment, we backed a company called Infront Media. Infront Media's business plan is to help leagues around the world and sports teams monetize their rights globally. Our investment took the form of a senior loan, but helped the company refinance existing debt and invest into future growth. Our view is that this will continue. Substantial amount of capital will be invested in the space. However, in the future, credit and structured capital will take a more prominent role in financing the business. Across both music and film content, we believe credit investors can utilize this investment strategy to gain exposure to an asset class that has high yield, stable cash flows, and low correlation with the macroeconomic environment, and thus serving as a strong diversifier for one's portfolio. Properly structured, both TV and film and music content in many ways act as a bond product with non-correlated returns and strong asset coverage. In the current market environment, investors can expect to acquire these rights at high single digits to mid double digit yields. And with leverage readily available at approximately 60% loan to value, these returns can be amplified. Investor interest has awakened. In 2018, financial investors made 9 investments in music IP. In 2022, that number grew to 117. Often, we do get the question, how does Carlyle underwrite and value these assets? What sort of characteristics do we look for in a particular investment? Content is very much a data-driven business. There is reams of historical data on performance that can be analyzed and sensitized to the variables of interest to an investor. For example, an investor in music IP can ask the question, how long has a song been in release? What does the initial 1-year, 5-year, 10-year curve of cash flows look like? And how does the artist's commercial activities today influence all their content? Some questions can be more macro-driven. An investor can ask, what is the pricing environment for music subscription services? What share of revenues are going to artists, and what are the trends? On our end, we typically focus on more mature content, where ongoing cash flow generation is more predictable, as well as content where we believe additional value can be generated. In conclusion, we can boil it down to 3 key takeaways. First, The timing is right to invest in the ecosystem of sports, media, and entertainment. The industry is undergoing transformational changes with significant increase in demand. 2. Opportunities continue to evolve, but they center around the capital that is needed to own and develop new content, as well as develop technologies that bring that content to viewers with a better experience. And 3, through highly structured instruments, investors can benefit from the cash generative nature of these assets, the more predictable nature of the returns, while benefiting from the downside protection that come with owning the intellectual property rights.